Thank you. Everyone, thank you for coming out here today. This is a great place to be. Wrigley Field, so much history and tradition, to be able to talk about the tradition of baseball. And Ernie, I can say this, it's a great place to play, but how come the wind was always blowing in and the grass was this long when we played here? Hard to get hits in this place, but it's a great place, again, for history and tradition. And let me begin here. What is tradition? By definition, it is statements, it is culture, it is language, it is legends. It's a wide variety of things that are passed down from generation to generation, father to son, and it's either by word of mouth or by action. This is what tradition is. So when we think of baseball tradition, one of the most iconic or the most memorable days in baseball history, all sports history, happened on October 3rd, 1951. It was a day not dissimilar or unlike today. It was a little overcast, it was brisk. 154 games weren't enough for the two teams that were vying to win the pennant. It was the Brooklyn Dodgers and it was the New York Giants. 154 games weren't enough. There was a 3-game playoff set up and each team won one game. The next game goes 9 innings and it's getting late in the game. Ralph Branca's on the mound, Bobby Thompson's up, and the little unknown at the time, Willie Mays, was on deck. And everybody remembers and they've heard that. Here's the pitch, and there's a long drive to left field, and it's a home run, and the Giants win the pennant. The Giants win the pennant. Everybody knows that. Everybody knows that sporting event. Until about 3 or 4 weeks ago, it is still the most important and most well-known event happening in sports history, and it's been transported, it's been passed on from generation to generation. So there were two things that happened on that day. Not only did Thompson hit that home run and the Giants win the pennant, after coming back from an improbable 13.5 game deficit as late as August 11th, that's why it was so important. It was a great, great comeback. And on this day, another thing happened. That's the day I happened to be born. And with a name like Win and Field and playing baseball, was it Providence, whether it was luck? I don't know. But baseball was in my blood from that day on. Going back just a little bit in time to rural Williamsport, Pennsylvania, a gentleman named Carl Stotts had a couple of nephews that loved to play the game of baseball. So he got creative and he said, you know, I'm going to reconfigure this baseball field, shorten it up, shorten the bases up, the pitcher's mound, so that these little pint-sized guys could play the game. And once he did that, I mean, this was the birth of Little League. 1939, 1947 was the first Little League World Series, but nevertheless, the credo that he had developed at that time was for his community to volunteer, get together, let's work on behalf of young people, give them something positive to be involved in and help build character, courage, and loyalty. And that's what Little League has done. Little League, even today, has become the pipeline of so many kids playing baseball. Almost 2 million kids per year play this game of baseball, more than any other sport. And it is a foundation of America, and when you talk about tradition, they carry it on as well as anyone. Next slide. This slide reminds me of when I grew up in St. Paul, Minnesota. My brother Steve and I, we'd get up early on the weekends or during the summer. Man, we'd grab any ball, plastic ball, rubber ball, tennis ball, you know, and a broken bat taped up, whatever, and we run out and find somebody in the neighborhood. We didn't have to wait for a play date. They didn't have play dates back then. But we didn't have to wait for that. We'd run and find some kids in the neighborhood. We'd invent games. You didn't need 9 people. You didn't need an umpire. You didn't need an open field because we're going to jump a fence or whatever. And we're going to play stick ball, stoop ball, strikeout, home run derby, whatever it was. We'd play all day long. This is where we developed that love of the game, and that's where kids and people across America develop that love. What's different today, now kids are focused inside, they're playing their games and such, and they don't get out as much. But this is where we develop the love of the game. From that love of the game, playing all the time, I mean, I played the other sports and such, but we had good teams. We learned all the lessons my friend Ernie Banks was talking about. Teamwork, love of the sport, being on time, giving it your best, overcoming obstacles, all these things. I was fortunate. I had a good coach, taught us the fundamentals, taught us how to play right. We had fun doing it, and it took me far. I was all city in St. Paul. I played every position. You never end up where you start. I started out as a third baseman, played shortstop, pitched, hit, played shortstop. I go to the University of Minnesota. Well, in fact, after high school, and history would be different if I made another choice. I was drafted. It was exciting time. I was drafted by the Baltimore Orioles. They wanted me to play. For them, they wanted me to pitch, and they said, "Have we got a deal for you? It's about $500 and a bus ride to Winfield, West Virginia." I said, "No, thank you. I'm going to college," which I was going anyway. So I went to the University of Minnesota. It was a great choice for me. 4 years later, I made, all Big Ten and All American. 4 years later, I ended up being drafted once again, but I was drafted in professional football, in NFL. I was drafted in basketball, NBA and ABA, and I was drafted by Major League Baseball, the San Diego Padres, and that was my dream come true, the opportunity to do that. So out of the University of Minnesota, I was catapulted to the next level. One of the things that's so exciting, listen, for over 100 years, there is an element of baseball that goes from generation to generation. It's tradition. It's that baseball card. Everybody sees it. This is my rookie card there, but when you know you've made it, when you got your baseball card. That was one of the exciting things for me. It truly was. I'd accomplished a lot, done great things, but when I came to that spring training, and Ernie, you get your face on a baseball card, that was an exciting thing for me. And this little piece of cardboard or whatever it's made out of, which has a man's face, his stats, his nickname, teams he played for, foods he likes, whatever the case may be. It's just it's a thread, it's a common thread between players of the past and the present and the future, and and that tapestry that has been woven in America and baseball, this transports that information. Essentially, baseball, as far as we know, started being played in an organized fashion about 1845, 1846 around New York. Obviously, uniforms were different. The rules have changed over time, but that's when it kind of began. In about 1869, the first professional team was developed in Cincinnati. They weren't called I think Red Stockings, but they were the Cincinnati Reds. And that's why when you look at professional baseball, usually the first game of the season is in the National League in Cincinnati in honor of them being the first team to be a professional team. Now, there weren't as many large name figures, sports or anything else in other parts of our society in the 1918, 1920. A guy named George Herman Babe Ruth came around. He was big in a lot of different ways. He was rotund. He changed the game of baseball, starting hitting those prodigious home runs, big numbers. They even used the term Ruthian when he would hit home runs. They'd be hit so far. He was a tremendous player. He really captured everyone's imagination across this country, Babe Ruth and the New York Yankees. And he was part of many teams, that some of the greatest teams in history, Murderers Row. I mean, the New York Yankees had so many people come through that organization, with Ruth and Gehrig, and later on Joe DiMaggio, and even Roger Maris with the home run, and 61 home runs and that type of thing. So the Yankees have a long history. Babe Ruth was one of the key people to carry that forward. But just as important, come along in 1947, Jackie Robinson was the first to integrate first person of color, or let's say African American, to break into Major League Baseball. Branch Rickey gave him the opportunity. They knew it was time. And the thing that's everybody knows so much about Jackie, he's a transformative figure. He's one of the most well-known in all of sports. I have to give Jackie a lot of credit. I wouldn't have been able to play the game professionally if it were not for him to open the door. I tell his wife that many times, and his daughter. I really appreciate him. Never got the chance to meet him. But what Jackie also did, he transformed the landscape of America. You know, he changed it in social areas, political, not just in sports. And we all owe him a large debt of gratitude. And for those who don't, not only me am I thankful for what he did, but you have to understand, up to today, if you look at in 2011, across Major League Baseball, when the season started, there were people of color from 14 different countries played Major League Baseball. And over 27% of the people came from countries such as Dominican Republic, Panama, South Korea, all around the world. So everybody of color and from different countries owes a large debt of gratitude to Jackie Robinson. I show these pictures of this Willie Mays, Hank Aaron, Roberto Clemente, that a lot of people know about the Negro Leagues, but they don't know that from 1887 on, people of color weren't allowed to play America's sport, which was a white game at the time. So by 1920, Andrew Rube Foster came along, a good pitcher in his own right from Texas, put together the Negro National League, Negro American League. And they played from 1920 until their eventual demise, which started when Jackie integrated, but into the 1950s. They had wonderful games. There were approximately 2,000 men and a few women of color, and people from not just America, but from the Caribbean and places, from Cuba, you name it, to play in the Negro Leagues. And they alternately flourished, and then they went out of business in the late 50s. But as a result, there are still, I have to mention, there are still 4 Hall of Famers that did play in the Negro League, starting with our great friend Ernie Banks here, and yes indeed, Monty Irvin, Willie Mays, and Hank Aaron. And I'm glad to say I'm great friends with all these guys. If it wasn't for you, I wouldn't be where I am today. I show this picture because times are different in baseball. Starting in the 1970s, people start getting different tastes in sports. Baseball had been the only sport. Football came around. I remember when they didn't even think the Super Bowl would succeed because they didn't think it was going to catch on, but it has. Basketball, they weren't worried about basketball. They weren't playing soccer, none of that stuff. And then 25 years ago, who would have thought of extreme sports? Someone getting a 2x4 and putting a roller skate on it and surfing the urban concrete. No one would have imagined that. But having said that, you still look at this. This is what's interesting. To be as good as we were at our sport, not bragging about it. There's a recent book by Malcolm Gladwell written, Outliers, that says it takes about 10 years or 10,000 hours to focus on being proficient or professional at your chosen occupation or profession. But what recent media and advertising studies show that a kid 20 years old now has spent those 10,000 hours video games. So it gives you an idea of a change, a shift in culture, interest, and tradition. Some people ask me, what do you miss about baseball? I've been out 16 years now. Miss a lot of things. You miss the field. You miss the guys. You miss just having fun. You can be any age and have all kinds of fun playing this sport. But one of the things, I miss the people. I miss the humor. And I just use Yogi Berra, my good friend and former manager, as an example. I mean, it's not so much that I adore the guy for being such a great player and having 2 handfuls of world championship rings. I don't think anyone has won more than him. But it was the things that would come out of his mouth, the malapropisms, the things that he would say from time to time. Like, oh man, a nickel ain't worth a dime anymore. Or it ain't over till it's over. Or, you know, you come to a fork in the road, you take it. Or they said, Yogi, you know, you were a great left-handed hitter, but you golf right-handed. You had a great round. How is that? He said, it's easy. I'm amphibious. You know, things like this. You miss great people like that, but Yogi Berra was one of them. I'm showing you a picture of the Hall of Fame here. Essentially, understand, baseball is more than 140 years old, and millions of people have played. Over 17,000 have played professionally, but when you narrow it down, there's only 234 players in the Hall of Fame. There are 9 umpires. There are 20 managers, and I believe it's 32 executives and pioneers in the Hall of Fame. So it's a hallowed place. It's a place that I'm honored to be in. When I look back on my career and my life, it's just a great honor. A kid from St. Paul, Minnesota, who just learned to love the game and the sport. It took me around the world and meet the people and have the life that I've had. This is a great thing to be associated with, the Hall of Fame. And if you haven't visited, you should. It's a repository of so much of our nation's history and our sport. It's a great place. Very quickly, there are a lot of lessons you learn in life through sports, and I'll just essentially say this. There are 5 tools a professional baseball player can have. He can hit for average, hit for power, run, field, and throw. And essentially, I've learned that all the top people in sport, in business, in other areas, there are 5 things that they should follow. I want you to remember these things. Everybody, and this is if you want to be as good as you can be. Everybody starts out God-given ability, whatever it is. In sports, it varies. Hand-eye coordination, fast twitch muscle fibers, strength, quickness, whatever. But people all start there. The next level are the people who know the rules, techniques, fundamentals. You cannot succeed if you don't know the guidelines, what's expected, how to follow it. You can't win in baseball if you don't know the rules. You can't win in business if you don't know the rules. You can't go to college if you don't know the rules. The next one is purposeful practice. And I mean, prepare yourself for the time when it's on the line. Don't waste your time going through the motions. That's not preparing you to be the best you can be. Purposeful practice. The next level, physical fitness. Be as fit as you can be. It's going to carry you the long haul. Baseball's a 162-game season. You got to go the distance. You got to be prepared. And the last one is mental toughness. It takes mental acuity. You got to be sharp. You have to be prepared. You have to go when you're tired, or your dog is sick, or your girlfriend left you, or whatever the case may be. You have to be mentally tough to make it through a season. So those 5 levels, once again, God-given ability. Next, know the rules, techniques, fundamental. Next, purposeful practice. The next, physical fitness. The next, mental toughness. Coming close to the end here, I'll just say that I know as much as anyone where baseball has been and where it's going. And I know that baseball as a sport is just a part of our fabric of life in America. It brings together more people, more families, more teams, more schools, more communities, more cities, more states, more countries than anything. Baseball. And I'm so glad to be a part of it. And the last thing, I just want to say that to pass on this tradition, and I try to do it in whatever way I can, still being executive, Major League Baseball, speaking on television for one of the major sports channels. The best way that you as individuals can pass on the tradition and the history of baseball is to pull out either when the season starts, go and buy yourself a ticket, go to a game with someone, spend time with a loved one, have some fun, talk about anything, overcome things that you couldn't agree on in the past and you want to move forward. But I'm going to give the challenge to this young lady here. I'm going to give you this ball and this glove and to play catch with someone that you love, and that is the best way to keep the tradition of baseball going. Thank you very much.